This episode is sponsored by Shell Fleet Solutions, a Shell UK limited company. Fuel payments curbing your cash flow? Let Shell Fleet app help with that. Tailored for small businesses with up to 10 vehicles, 1 monthly payment, savings on fuel, no tie-ins, and digital sign-up in 5 to 10 minutes. Simple. To find out more, visit shell.co.uk/fleet app.
Welcome to this latest edition of the First Voice podcast, brought to you by First Voice magazine, the official flagship magazine of the Federation of Small Businesses, and the go-to podcast for news, tips, and important information for small businesses. In this episode, we'll be discussing a major issue that impacts many thousands of small businesses, and that's the issue of getting paid promptly. FSB's Small Business Index revealed recently that 400,000 small firms are currently under threat as a result of late payments, and that a third of all small businesses are impacted in some way by being paid late. While the onus is clearly on large businesses to pay on time, there are things small businesses can do to enhance their chances of being paid on time and to chase down late payments, and we'll explore some of those in this podcast. To help me do that, I'm pleased to say I'm joined by two guests. Liz Barkley is the Small Business Commissioner, heading up the independent public body set up by government to tackle late payment and unfavourable payment practices in the private sector. And Martin Matei is the FSB Policy Chairman, and will give us the perspective from FSB. Thanks very much for joining.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you. Look, let's start by exploring the scale of the problem, if we can. I mentioned, Martin, FSB's Small Business Index results there. What exactly are they telling us about just how firms are being affected by this?
I think it's the number one issue, and it has been consistently. I've been doing this role now for 6 years, and I can't think of one time where it hasn't been the number one issue. I mean, I know it's an old cliche, cash is king, but the reality is if your customers are not paying you, you're in big trouble. So it has definitely been the main issue and continues to be.
Small Business Index. Liz, your body was obviously set up to tackle exactly this problem. What impact are you seeing on small businesses?
I think probably the problem's getting worse in the current economic climate rather than better. I would say that we've got to be a bit careful about the language that we use around about this, because we talk about late payments. And to be fair, it's not always about overdue invoices. Quite often it's about late payments in that contracts have been agreed that allow for payment in 60 days, 90 days, 120 days. And I've even seen a fortnight ago, 150 days. Now that is 5 months beyond doing the work, putting the invoice in, and then waiting another 5 months to get paid. So there is a big problem around about the contractual agreements that are being made between small suppliers and their bigger customers. Small suppliers want the work, and so they do tend to accept those kind of payment terms if that's what's being offered to them. We need the bigger businesses to understand that those smaller suppliers are absolutely vital to the big businesses, and therefore they need to pay them quicker. And we would like to see them paying them within 30 days. As Martin says, cash is king, but actually cash flow is the absolute key, essential for a small business. And if you know that you're not going to get paid for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, then you know that you've got to manage your cash flow to tide you over that gap until the pay comes in. And that is really difficult. The smaller the business, the more they are dependent on the certainty as to when they're going to get paid. They need to know exactly when the money is going to appear in the bank account so that they can manage the gap. They can manage the cash flow and find other sources of finance if they need to tide them over. And we are seeing more those kind of extended terms being offered to small suppliers in the current climate, because their bigger customers are waiting to be paid by somebody else who is again paying them later. So it's a vicious circle at the moment, and we fear that it's going to get worse before it gets better.
You mentioned the 30 days sort of recommendation there. What should small businesses be setting as their payment terms? Is that the number, 30 days? Are there sort of guidelines and benchmarks around that? And what exactly is the onus on payers? You know, is there guidance for what they should be for their payment terms, Liz?
Well, the point is that people make agreements between themselves, and we can't interfere in that. But if there is no agreement, and it's not, payment terms haven't been mentioned, then the default is 30 days. We also run something called the Prompt Payment Code, and signatories to the Prompt Payment Code are expected, they commit to paying at least 95% of the invoices to their small suppliers within 30 days. So that is what we would like to see. However, if there isn't a contractual agreement, if nobody has talked about payment terms, and it does default to 30 days, then the difficulty is proving that in a lot of cases, because in most cases, contracts and payment terms aren't written down. And then it's a he said, she said situation where one side argues that they never said they'd pay, that there never was an agreement, and the other side says that there is an agreement. And so it's very, very difficult to untangle what actually has been agreed. And we can't interfere in contracts commercial contracts between businesses, but we would like to see that move, that culture, that payment culture, move to an acceptance of the fact that small businesses need at 119 days, when you have said a promise to pay in 120, that might be prompt, but that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for small businesses to get paid fast for the work that they do, because they're the talent that drives the success of their bigger business customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And Martin, what's the view on that within FSB? You know, are you guys advising smaller businesses to state, 30-day payment terms and to push for faster payment, be confident when they are agreeing those terms?
Yeah, we are pushing that, but let's be realistic about it. In most of these situations, there's a completely asymmetric power relationship. A big guy will come along and impose conditions. They don't negotiate conditions, they impose them. And in many cases, Liz is absolutely right. It's not a question of prompt payment, it's a question of poor payment. They impose poor payment conditions. Now, ultimately, I think that's self-defeating for a lot of these big companies, because they get the worst supply chain arrangements. They end up having a poor relationship with people that are key to the success of their business. And, I think if their shareholders were aware of how they were behaving, they would be very angry with them, because they know that their success will depend on the relationship with this supply chain. I mean, I've sort of characterized the two kinds of major businesses that I come across. Some of them are what I would call malign. They actually set out to pay late. They have every intention of keeping cash in their bank account for the last possible minute and trying to squeeze the money from their supply chain. And then there's the useless ones. And the useless ones are just simply poorly organized. They see no priority in paying people on time. They don't set out to pay people late. They're just not very good.
I have to agree with you, Martin. I'm smiling at that. I have to agree with you. Sometimes it's not so much useless as the fact that no investment has been put into payment processes, and the payment processes themselves are fairly antiquated, and they make it impossible to pay quickly. I had a really good example the other day of a small business owner who said to me, I was offered 120 days payment terms. I did push back, because I did say, if you want me as your supplier and I am the best, then you're going to have to pay me quicker because I can't afford to wait 120 days to be paid. And in the end, the customer came back and said, I've checked the processes. We can't pay you in 30 days. Our processes simply won't allow it. We can pay you in 45 though. So they did negotiate. They came to a much better arrangement. But I think at that point, the customer probably realized that their payment processes were particularly difficult. So it is difficult. And also, Martin, what you say about the shareholders, I also say about board members. If you've got a big company board, the chair must know about the payment practices. The NEDs the non-exec directors need to know about the payment practices. And I don't think in most companies they ask those questions. We need to get it on a board agenda as well as the shareholders. They need to know how well their big companies are treating their smaller suppliers.
I agree with you, Liz. I mean, I remember when Carillion went down and their chief exec was in front of the select committee, and he was completely unaware, or at least he pretended to be unaware, of how badly they were paying their suppliers. And they became legend in the construction industry, which is pretty poor to start off with, for paying people really slowly. So, you know, I think there are people in these organizations who know they've set out to pay slowly, but I think they need to be answerable to somebody within the organization. Now, what we're saying is, look, why doesn't the chair of the audit committee be responsible for that, so that they are answerable to their shareholders, they're answerable to anybody, any external bodies, and they take the responsibility to find out what the payment practice is, and if necessary, question it, challenge the CEO that they shouldn't be doing this.
And Martin, I think you know there is a review going on at the moment that could possibly lead to that outcome. And I think that that would be an extremely useful place. But, you know, we both work with small businesses, and we do know too that the small businesses, we have to help the small businesses to get the information they need to get paid. I mean, I've been freelance most of my working life. If I have 6 different clients at any one time, they have 6 different sets of processes. Now, I can't work out by osmosis what their payment processes are. I need them to tell me. I need to know what needs to go on the invoice, when the invoice needs to go in. Is there a PO number that I need to have on the invoice? Who is my point of contact? Because my point of contact in payments is not the person who gave me the work in the first place. So, you know, I think we need to put a lot of thinking into how we help the small suppliers to get the information that they need to get paid on time, because there was some research in 2019, I think it was, that showed that 42% of invoices that go in with mistakes on. Now, that then gives the bigger customer an excuse to delay the payment because there's a mistake on the invoice, so you need to resubmit it. And that could happen several times before you actually get there. We want to see big businesses giving the information upfront to their small suppliers when they take them on to do a piece of work. Yeah, so there's a lot of work to be done.
I agree with you, Liz. I mean, I think the parallel is with taking on a new member of staff. You know, if you took on a member of your team, you would give them an induction. You would make sure they understood your procedures and how you operated. And I don't think a lot of big businesses take the same view of their supply chain. They should be going to their suppliers and saying, look, these are the kind of things you need to do. These are the kind of people, or these are the people you need to contact if you've not got paid on time. That is just simply good practice. And I think ultimately that will pay dividends for them in terms of their relationship with their supply chain. You know, I mean, I think in many cases, they're overcomplicated for very good reasons. They want to pay people late. And, you know, the classic is the construction industry. It has this completely opaque system and employs lots of QSs to avoid paying what is, you know, the required amount. They have to get certification before they even issue an invoice. So sometimes it can take months and months before they get a certificate of payment, and then they'll pay within 30 days. And they tell the world, they trumpet it, that they're good payers. They're not good payers. They've delayed people for months before they get paid. So
We do.
It's just a bad culture, and it's
Yes.
something we need to tackle urgently.
And we do see that. I mean, last week I saw a small business had been asked to resubmit invoices 2 months after the original submission of the invoice. Now, what's that all about? And of course, then they were paid within 10 days, and then it looks like those invoices have been paid within 30 days. That's not what this is about. That's not fair practice. But we need to, there are good practices out there. There are companies that are really trying very, very hard to get this right, good inductions and all the rest of it. And I think we need to load those to the skies if we can and say, this is what we're hoping to get from you. This is the kind of practice we want to see. And then perhaps we can drive better practice through some of the sectors that are particularly difficult.
You're absolutely right. And I've openly said to several organizations that when we first met with Capita had a lousy reputation for paying people very slowly and inefficiently. We spoke to their new chief executive, and he changed the culture within the organization, so they wanted to pay on time, and everybody in that organization knew that they should pay on time. It's completely transformed the way they operate now. So I'm more than happy to praise people who are good payers. I want to have examples of good payers and show the rest of the world that they can do the same thing. It's just they're few and far between.
Well, I'm hoping that by holding up those good examples, we can get other people to aspire to doing that. But certainly if this was a governance issue, if they're at the top, that's what happened at Capita. The change was coming from that new CEO. It was driving it through from the top. And I think boards really have to take responsibility here and step up to the plate and start driving that cultural change.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so compelling message there that there's a big onus on big firms, but also things that small businesses can do to put themselves in the best possible position to be paid promptly. And thank you for sharing lots of those. Can I ask you, Liz, as well, if you think there's a role for technology in that? Technology has been, the value of technology has been heightened considerably in the last 18 months to 2 years, obviously. And invoicing and payment systems are going in that direction too. That technology can help as well, can
it? Certainly can. Small businesses are telling me that when they have embraced technology in order to help them with their invoicing, help them with their credit management, with their invoice management, they save about half a day a week that they can then put into planning for their business, for the next step, for the next stage. It's also saving people money, which can then be invested in training and skills or whatever else the business needs in order to thrive and grow. And at the moment, of course, when we're facing this cost of living crisis, which isn't just a cost of living crisis, it's a cost of doing business crisis, and it hits small businesses particularly hard because those small businesses, the smallest end, are in business to support the household, and it's a double whammy for them. Every penny counts. And so if you can take this opportunity perhaps to move to digital technology that will help you, then I think you will discover it's to your advantage. But there's lots of things that the tech companies can do to make the process even more seamless than it is at the moment. There's lots that they are thinking about how they can help do more than just the invoicing or the tax returns, etc. So I think we'll see some developments too when it comes to helping small businesses run more effectively and efficiently the business side of things, because actually what we really want to do is make wonderful widgets. Most of us aren't in the business to do the paperwork. We're in the business to make the widgets. And that's the bit that we want to do, the bit we love. So technology can help you do the bit that you're less fond of.
Yeah. I mean, the average
Absolutely.
small business spends about 15 days a year chasing invoices. That's nobody's idea of fun, but I think you're right, Liz, there are ways in which you can reduce that by using smarter technology. But I'd also say, some of these big firms, if they genuinely want to improve the way in which they pay people, there is some smart technology out there now that they can pay people almost instantaneously because they know that those people are reliable, low-risk payment characters. So they can pay them immediately. And if there are more high-risk people, people who traditionally have provided poor service or poor products, well, then they can spend the time, making sure that that's right. But the trouble with many big businesses is they lump everybody into the same category and push everybody down the same channel where a whole lot of checks have to be done before they're prepared to pay them.
Yeah, and then, you mentioned the amount of time that small businesses spend chasing down late payments. When they get particularly late and they occasionally stop getting responses, or it's dragging to a really unreasonable amount of time, what are their options there? What are small businesses' options when it comes to taking other routes to try and get paid?
Come and talk to us at the Small Business Commissioner's Office. We have a dispute resolution service. Now, we don't see many people actually coming to us and giving us their details. What we do see is a lot of people accessing the website, looking at whether or not they can charge interest on the payments that were due and haven't yet been paid. Is there compensation that they can charge? And they go back armed with that information to the customer. And we know that quite often they are getting paid. So there's a good first step to take to try to get paid. The problem is at the moment that a lot of small businesses are not being paid by other small businesses because they're waiting to get paid, and everybody is really, really worried about the knock-on effect and how many of those small businesses may disappear. As the FSB report in January said, it is possible that 440,000 small businesses in the UK could go to the wall because of these payment situations that they find themselves in. And that is something we just cannot afford in terms of talent, in terms of innovation, in terms of job creation. We cannot afford that to happen in the UK at this point in time.
John, I think I would also encourage everybody to contact Liz if they're not getting paid and they feel that this is an example of an organisation that's just got a really poor culture. I mean, we are currently throughout Europe, we're the worst country in Europe when it comes to payment culture. I think out of a ranking of 15 major countries in Europe, we were the lowest in terms of poor payment practice. Wow. So we have a real problem here. But I think by giving Liz the ammunition, showing that she can then go to ministers and explain the kind of practices that are endemic in business in the UK, then hopefully that pushes it up the agenda. I mean, I get lots of warm words from ministers in government about what they're going to do about this. The more information you give Liz, the better the chance we have of trying to resolve this issue.
Martin, yes. I can't do anything without evidence. So please, 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 I need the evidence from the FSB. I need the evidence from other small business organisations, and I need the evidence from the small businesses themselves. We also need to make it very, very clear that if you're not getting paid on time and you don't know whether you're going to be able to keep your business running, the next thing is sleepless nights, and that follows on mental health issues, relationship problems, and people are in danger of losing not just their businesses, but perhaps their relationships, and in some cases, even their homes as well. This is a really important social issue as well as a business issue, and we've got to address it now.
I think as well,
it's a very real one.
I don't want to minimize this because I know that when small businesses have got a major customer that they've taken years to try and get this customer, they don't want to alienate them. They don't want to get in a fight with them. They find charging interest distasteful. But in the end, you have to stand up for the whole small business community and make sure that these companies are called out. If we can make sure the prompt payment code is more effectively part of government infrastructure, that they don't they don't take on the suppliers that don't meet these very minimum standards in government. And also, we're calling for the Prime Minister to make sure that, you know, members of their business advisory council are not one of these poor paying organizations. So ultimately, if you are one of the poor organizations that consistently pays badly, you will be treated as a sort of pariah. You will not be welcome as far as government's concerned. And ultimately, your shareholders will get to find out about you and they'll be on your back as well.
It sounds from that, Martin, there's plenty of lobbying and work going on to raise the profile and the importance of this. Liz, I'll just get a final word from you on what the Small Business Commissioner is doing and can do to really kind of keep this top of the agenda. What's front of mind for you guys in the next sort of few months and pushing this?
Well, I want to try to get across the real understanding of the impact of late payments, poor payment practices of any sort, of long payment terms and contracts. The impact is not just about the business itself. It absolutely impacts business. The uncertainty impacts business, but it also impacts the owners. It impacts the employees and their families. This is a much, much wider ripple effect than just somebody thinking, I won't pay that invoice because it's Friday, I'll do that on Monday. We have seen a situation on a Friday where a woman came to the office and said she had nothing left in her bank account to feed her children over the weekend. And I just think how scary that is for everybody concerned. And when we contacted the business, they said, the customer, they said, we had no idea. To us, it was much more important to pay the 30 grand bill on Friday because that was the big one. We needed to get that payment out than to pay the 300 pound bill. But that 300 pound invoice, that money was much, that was a matter of feeding your family or not for that person running that small business. And you've got to remember that. We've got to get these messages across as clearly as we possibly can to big business, to policymakers, to influencers, and to the businesses themselves. Come and talk to us. Don't struggle on Friday afternoon thinking you're not going to be able to eat over the weekend.
Yeah, that's an incredibly compelling message to end on. Thank you, both of you, for exploring in good detail such a big issue impacting hundreds of thousands of businesses, but also their owners, their employees, and their families. Thank you very much for your insights. Thank you also to our audience for listening. While I have your attention, I would just like to remind you that you can subscribe to the First Voice podcast to receive regular updates and guidance on the big issues affecting small businesses. And do please also remember that you can find a whole host of additional webinars, podcasts, and other content on the First Voice website at firstvoice.fsb.org.uk. Many thanks for listening.
This episode is sponsored by Shell Fleet Solutions, a Shell UK limited company. Fuel payments curbing your cash flow? Let Shell Fleet app help with that. Tailored for small businesses with up to 10 vehicles, 1 monthly payment, savings on fuel, no tie-ins, and digital sign-up in 5 to 10 minutes. Simple. To find out more, visit shell.co.uk/fleet app.